Hi everybody, I'm Connie Stewart with SimplySimpleStamping.com. Welcome to today's Tuesday tip video on understanding measurements for card making. I think most of us are familiar with the 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 3/4, and then over to 2. I think that one we're pretty much used to. But sometimes when we get into those 8ths and 16ths, boy, it just sends us over the edge, right? And so one of the ways that I like to look at this ruler when I'm looking at it is, okay, I know where 1 1/4 is, right? And so 1 1/8 would be in between. And here's how I like to look at it. If I go 1, 3, 5, and 7, basically counting the odd numbers, that's how I know where my 8ths are. So it'll be 1/8, 3/8, 5/8, and 7/8. So it's really easy to just go in between and just count your odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, and 7. So I hope that's helpful. Now when we get into the 16ths, it's kind of going to do the same thing. We're going to be counting over with those odd numbers, 1/16, 3/16, 5/16, 7/16, 9, 11, 13, and 15. Now, I know we don't use 16ths very often, but there are times it might be a measurement, and so I wanted to go ahead and point that one out to you. So, if you are good with your quarter, your half, and your 3/4, finding your 8ths is as simple as just going in between and counting over your odd numbers. Now, you guys know I always have a free download for you, and I have a copy of that ruler here on my download. So this will be a great one for you to print off, so you'll always have that nice visual of how a ruler works. Now for part 2 of my understanding card measurements, let's talk a little bit about how to create those layers, how we're going to be cutting this cardstock. Here in the United States, we tend to use an 8.5 by 11. That is our base size cardstock here in the US. And here on my handout for today, we're going to be using just that. So if you've ever heard me talk about portrait or landscape, well, let me show you what I mean. If you were to look at this as a portrait, yep, we've got the Mona Lisa right here, right? This is in portrait mode. So we have the 8.5 at the top going down the 11 inches. Now, if we were doing landscape, well, again, remember a landscape would go this way. So that's going to put the 8.5 on the side and the 11 inches at the top and the bottom. So I do, whenever I like to talk cardstock, I like to talk portrait and landscape. Now let's talk about cutting and scoring a piece of cardstock. So when we make cards, an A2 size card, we start with an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock typically, and there's 2 different ways you can go about scoring and cutting. So the first one, I'm going to score, I'm going to put the 8.5 up at the top, and I will score that at 4 1/4 inches. I'm going to put the 11 inches up at the top, and I will cut it at 5 1/2, and you can see that's going to create this size card, which is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And of course, we can take it portrait or landscape. Now let's create the other size card, and this time instead of cutting at 5 1/2, I'm going to score at 5 1/2. Remember, 11 inches up at the top, scored at 5 1/2. I'll rotate it around, and now I will cut it at 4 1/4, and this creates another version. Again, it can be portrait or landscape, however you want your card to open. So those are the 2 different versions of how to score and cut an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. Now let's talk about layering cardstock. This is the one that I think gets a lot of us. What size cardstock do I need to put here on my card? And what size border? What kind of layers do we want? Well, I've got a chart here that's going to make it very easy for you. So if you are wanting a 1/8 inch border, and let's stop and talk about that for just a second. You're going to start with your 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and we can just go down. So this would be a 4 by 5 1/4. There is a layer that is 4 by 5 1/4. If you want another border, we're going to go 3 3/4 by 5. Just like so. And can you see we have a 1/8 inch border all the way around? So when I say this is your 1/8 inch border, that's what you're going to do. All right, now Let's say you want a really thin mat. Well, we're going to do that one a little bit different. We're going to go from the 1/8 inch border and we're going to come just across to the next size down. So we'll start with this one here. Remember, this was our 4 by 5 1/4, right? Now let's go down one size, 4 by 5 1/4. Our next one will be a 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And this is a perfect time for us to use our ruler. So 3 7/8 is going to be in between the 3 3/4 and 4. And so we're going to find that line. We're going to find the line that's in between those two. I can cut that down to 3 7/8. Now we're going to rotate it around. And remember, this one was a 5 1/8. So that's going to be between 5 and 5 1/4. Remember, we're just going to count the odd numbers. And now let's see what that looks like when we add that layer. Do you see the difference? Do you see it's a really thin mat? That would be a 1 1/16 of an inch border. And for the 1/16 border all the way around, again, we'll use this column. Now, who wants to try to remember all of that? Well, I've got a free download that goes along with today's video. So everything I just went over with you is right here in this download. So print this out, keep it nearby in your stamp room. It's going to come in awfully handy. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the last part. We are going to create a template layering tool. Guys, this thing is fantastic. And I even have a download that goes along with that as well. In today's download, I have got a label printout for you. If you have the address labels, these would be the 1 by 2 5/8, also known as the Avery 5260, or if you have address labels that have 30 on a sheet, that's the one that we need. So I took my file for today and I printed it out here onto a set of label sheets. Like I said, this is a one-time thing. Once you make it, you're set for life. And this has all the measurements. 4 1/4, 4 1/8, 4, 3 7/8. See how these just go down? We're going to go all the way down to a 1 7/8 by 3 1/8. I'm going to start with 2 different colors of cardstock. This is going to make seeing these layers much easier. I chose bright colors. You can choose whatever you want. So for my first piece of cardstock, I'm going to follow the 1/8 inch border, all right? And we're just simply going to cut. I personally like to start with the 8 1/2 up at the top. So we're going to cut this down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Remember, that's really just kind of what we did before. So we're cutting this into quarters. So there is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Let's grab our label. And we're going to put that right there in the middle. I'm going to set that one off to the side. I'm going to come in with this other half that we used, and let's go down the list. We're going to go 4 by 5 1/4. Very easy. 4 by 5 1/4. So my next size on the 1/8 inch. Now, when I bring in my labels, I am going to skip because this is the 4 by 5 1/4. Add a label there. Take my remaining piece of cardstock. We're going to go down again. I'll cut this down to 3 3/4 by 5. Again, I don't have to question. They're all right here, right? Add another label there. 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. Okay, you guys know the drill. I think you're figuring it out. We are going to continue. I'm going to go ahead and continue cutting all of my cardstock for the 1/8 inch border column. And there we go. I've got all my labels. I've measured everything, cut everything. It took 2 sheets of cardstock to create that. So it doesn't take a lot. You could also use your scraps. Feel free to use that. Now that we have our 1/8 inch borders, let's create our 1/16. And guys, it's going to happen the exact same way. 4 1/8. Again, remember, we're going to start with that 8 1/2 up at the top. So 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And remember, we go 1, 2, and 3 because remember, that's what we learned, right? So there will be my 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. We'll take that other piece and we are going to go 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And you see, these are actually going to create another 1/8 inch border. It's how we add these and these together that's going to give us our 1 16. Tell you what, let me go ahead and get the rest of my labels on my 1/8 inch. There we go. So I've got all my labels on my layering template tool. What to do with these? All right, let me show you. So I'm going to start with the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 because, like we talked about, that's a base size for a card. Now I know I can bring in my next size layer, and maybe I look at that and go, that's a little too tight. I don't think I want to go that tight. I will go to my next layer here, my 4 by 5 1/4, and go, I think I want a little bit more of a border. We'll go to our next size down. Ooh, I kind of like that. I like a little bit more of that layer showing behind there. And I can then, if I want to add my next layer here, so I'm just going to work my way down. Do you see how that looks? So if I want to give a bigger border here, a narrower border there, maybe you want to really go crazy and bring it way down. You've got all of your templates right here. You don't even really have to keep them in order. You can just kind of sit there and play, change things up all you want. Again, now you know once you get this set, however you want to do it, now that you've got it, you can look at your template and say, I know exactly what size to cut my cardstock in order to create this design. Having these ready to go is going to make it so easy. I've got one more little tip to share with you. Take one of Stampin' Up's standard stamp cases. We can just take all these pieces. As I said, I really don't have to keep them in order. I now protect those. I can keep that out on my stamping table. When I'm needing an idea of what my measurements will be before I ever cut cardstock, this little layering template tool is going to be awesome. It's going to make your life super easy. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you liked the video. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed, click that subscribe button. YouTube will let you know whenever I'm back with a new video. We'll see you guys on the next one. Have a great day. Bye-bye.